Interest rates rise for the second time this year, putting more pressure on borrowers as the cost of living bites.
This additional rise in mortgage rates is going to be hard for some people, I do understand that, but it'll be much worse if inflation gets built into the fibres.
Donald Trump criticises US allies for refusing to help protect the Strait of Hormuz. Afghanistan accuses Pakistan of killing hundreds of people in an airstrike on a Kabul hospital. And the Matildas gear up to take on defending champions China tonight for a place in the Asian Cup final. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Joe O'Brien. Mortgage repayments are set to rise after the Reserve Bank voted to lift interest rates. It's increased the benchmark cash rate by 0.25 of a percentage point to 4.1%. That takes it back to the same level as a year ago. Uncertainty surrounding the Middle East conflict and the global jump in oil prices played a part in the RBA's decision. The Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, says global instability is putting even more pressure on families and businesses already doing it tough.
This is obviously not the decision that lots of Australians were hoping for. It's not a surprising decision, but that doesn't make it any easier for millions of Australians with a mortgage. We've got an inflation challenge in our economy already, and developments in the Middle East are making that worse.
The Shadow Treasurer, Tim Wilson, says the government needs to take accountability.
It's clear that the government is seeking to avoid the responsibility they have. It's clear that the government is ignoring the spending that it is contributing to inflation. It's clear that the government is denying their contribution towards a household pressure that they're putting Australians under. Australians need a government that is straightforward and honest about the pressure they're placing up on interest rates through debt spending, which is causing inflation.
And finance presenter Alicia Barry joins us now. Alicia, g'day. So the Reserve Bank Governor mentioned the war in the Middle East, but it seems the primary focus of concern is the pre-existing inflation in Australia.
The Reserve Bank Board is really united when it comes to bringing down inflation, and the primary focus at the moment is the domestic economy. But the war in the Middle East has complicated things, and the Reserve Bank Governor said that the board had a very robust discussion about when to raise interest rates. Timing was an issue in terms of an agreement point. It was a divided decision today. The 5-4 split, obviously those 5 in favour of a hike in March, 1 out. The fact is that supply is not keeping up with demand, and that is causing the economy to hit a speed limit and inflationary pressures to build. We saw that at the end of last year, and the Reserve Bank says even the jobs market is stronger than they thought it was, and the fact is they have to bring inflation down. But at the same time, they are worried that oil prices could feed in petrol prices, keep them higher for longer, and that could feed into headline inflation, which then feeds into everything else. So inflation is their number one priority. But Joe, as you say, that domestic picture is certainly what they've been looking at. If we take a look at how interest rates have played out in Australia recently, you can see there that we've come down and then gone back up again to 4.1%, which is where the cash rate was between February and May last year. The Reserve Bank really at pains to say that they haven't taken interest rates as high as in other countries to preserve the gains in the jobs market, but that may have to be undone somewhat now as they really try and get on top of inflation at a time when other central banks are either cutting or on hold.
And second rate hike in as many months. So it's good if you've got savings, but not so good if you're paying off a mortgage. What's the damage for people paying off a mortgage?
Yeah, that's right. It's almost certain that the banks are going to pass this on in the next few weeks, and that means a 25 basis point increase to mortgage rates for those people who have debt and paying off home loans. So if we take a look, you can see here over a 25-year horizon, those with a $500,000 mortgage will see their repayments monthly increase by $76. For those on a $700,000 mortgage, that goes up to $106. And then for people who have a $1 million mortgage, which is not uncommon in big capital cities like Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane now, $151 increase monthly to those mortgage repayments. And this comes at a time when petrol prices are now elevated. Households are really being hit on a couple of fronts. Michelle Bullock was asked about this, and the Reserve Bank just has one tool it can use to bring down inflation. She said she's really alive to the concerns of households.
I personally cannot tell people how to manage their finances, but I do understand that it's going to be tough for some people, and this hit with the fuel prices and this additional rise in mortgage rates is going to be hard for some people. I do understand that. But it'll be much worse if inflation gets built into the fibres, and then we will see the costs of everything going up, and that will be a much worse outcome.
The Reserve Bank Governor speaking there this afternoon. And Alicia, is it fair enough to say that the majority of experts at this stage expect there could well be another one or even two interest rate rises this year?
It does look like there could be more, Joe. I mean, Michelle Bullock wouldn't give any forward guidance, as she would say. She was asked a number of times whether this March hike is trying to get in front of a May one, so perhaps we won't see that. But look, the market is pricing in a 40% chance that we'll see an interest rate hike in May. And also, if we look ahead, there's at least two more priced in, with interest rates tipped to be about 4.6% at the beginning of next year. So this is a big turnaround from where we were at the end of last year. But of course, those forecasts can change because we do have an ongoing situation in the Middle East and a very uncertain global outlook. But at this point, the direction of interest rates looks to be up, with more coming. The market took it in its stride today. We saw about 1/3% gain for the All Ords and the ASX 200 index. Of course, as this decision was expected, there wasn't a huge amount of reaction on the market. The Australian dollar, though, was knocked initially after that split decision from the Reserve Bank. The disunity really knocked traders' confidence in where the direction of rates were going, but it has picked back up now and is marching toward that 71 US cent mark.
Thanks, Alicia. And fuel companies are being warned they could face multi-million-dollar fines if they engage in deceptive conduct. The consumer watchdog has held an emergency meeting with fuel companies to discuss concerns about rising fuel prices since that war broke out in the Middle East. Political reporter Sarah Tomevska joins us now from Parliament House in Canberra. Sarah, good day. So what's the watchdog had to say?
Hi, Joe. Yeah, well, it seems that this meeting was primarily an opportunity for the ACCC to issue a stern word to major fuel retailers. In a statement, the ACCC said that it outlined to these companies the impact rapid price spikes and fuel supply issues were having on consumers, and warned them they could face multi-million-dollar fines for collusive, anti-competitive, misleading or deceptive conduct. So we have seen across both regional and metropolitan areas, on average, a 50-cent per litre spike in petrol and diesel prices. Reports across the country of diesel in excess of $3 a litre. Driving to work here today in Canberra, I drove past a petrol station with unleaded retailing at $2.90 a litre. So these are massive price increases in just the last few weeks since this latest war in the Middle East broke out. The sector has primarily attributed these price rises to panic buying and a surge in demand, but the ACCC has been emboldened by, or will be emboldened by, the federal government to double penalties penalties it can impose on dodgy retailers, up to $100 million. The Treasurer today confirming that legislation will be introduced to Parliament next week. It's expected to pass without opposition. The opposition leader, Angus Taylor, today also talking about the fact that these prices are really concerning and that if retailers are found to be price gouging, they should face consequences.
Price gouging is unacceptable. It's not hard to work out what the price should be based on international prices. Very clear. The ACCC needs to be all over this and taking to task any company that's doing the wrong thing.
And so, Sarah, what are the details of what the government is doing to build supply?
Yes, so late last week there were two main announcements from the federal government. The first, that 20% of Australia's reserves of diesel and petrol would be released to help address the supply shortage issue being experienced particularly in regional areas. And also the Energy Minister Chris Bowen announced that he would relax the fuel quality standards so that Australia's two domestic oil refineries could sell higher sulphur content fuel to the domestic market. That had been the case, but last December the government made a move to introduce these higher standard regulations, which meant that while diesel and jet fuel are still being kept here domestically, Ampol was exporting that lower quality fuel overseas. For 60 days, that fuel will now remain in the country, sold to Australian consumers. So Chris Bowen has said he expects that these measures will lead to fuel flowing in the immediate future, but he did temper a little bit of the timeline. He said these things can take a little bit of time because of Australia's complicated supply chains. He did stress, though, that these efforts to increase supply will be quickly unwrapped if people continue panic buying. So really reiterating the message that there is no need to fill up multiple jerry cans or, drums of fuel to stockpile petrol. And also just reiterating that the shipments of fuel, crude oil and refined liquid fuels that are expected to come to Australia over the next few months are still on schedule to arrive.
Okay, Sarah.
Every ship that we have expected to arrive has arrived, whether it's diesel, petrol or jet fuel. You're right. All the companies say to me that they fully expect all deliveries all through March and well into April, but we are in an internationally uncertain time. And that's why we're doing such planning at the moment.
Now, we have heard from Ampol, which has said that its plans to upgrade its facilities to be able to refine petrol to those new and improved standards is in place. Those upgrades are in train, and that should happen within the next few months, meaning that all of the fuel that is refined in Australia can remain onshore domestically.
Okay, Sarah Tomesco there in Canberra. The US President has intensified pressure on other nations to help secure the Strait of Hormuz. The vital shipping route linking the Persian Gulf with the Arabian Sea has been effectively closed to tankers since the US-led war on Iran began. European and NATO leaders are resisting President Trump's demands to send warships to the region.
We don't need them, but it's interesting. I'm almost doing it in some cases, not because we need them, but because I want to find out how they react. Because I've been saying for years that if we ever did need them, they won't be there. Not all of them, but they won't be there.
Like the United States and Israel, we want to see an end to Iran's nuclear and missile programs, but we will not participate in this war. We made that clear from day one, and that remains the position of the federal government.
Nobody wants to go actively in this war, and of course everybody is concerned what will be the outcome.
While taking the necessary action to defend ourselves and our allies, we will not be drawn into the wider war.
And a wave of drones and rockets have been launched at the US Embassy in Iraq's capital, Baghdad, with security officials describing the attack as the most intense assault yet. Israeli defences continue to intercept Iranian missiles, this one over the West Bank. Missile debris has fallen onto buildings in occupied East Jerusalem and the Old City, home to significant holy sites. And civilians in Lebanon are bearing the brunt of the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah along the border. Israeli troops have crossed into southern Lebanon, a move European leaders have condemned. Afghanistan's Taliban government has accused Pakistan of killing at least 400 people in an attack on a hospital in Kabul. The government says an airstrike destroyed parts of the 2,000-bed facility used for the treatment of drug users. Pakistan has dismissed the accusations, saying its strikes had not hit any civilian sites. It marks a dramatic escalation in a conflict that began late last month. Pakistan accuses Afghanistan of harbouring militants, a claim the Taliban denies. The body of a crew member on board a ship in Hobart has been found by police divers. The 23-year-old French national jumped from the science expedition ship at Franklin Wharf in the early hours of this morning. His body was found a few hours later. Police believe alcohol may have been involved and the crew members were nearing the end of their trip. The man had been due to fly out of Tasmania today. The Bureau of Meteorology has issued a cyclone watch for far north Queensland. Connor Byrne reports from Cairns.
The Bureau of Meteorology has published its first cyclone tracking map for the tropical low 34U, which is expected to be named as Tropical Cyclone Narelle tonight at 10 o'clock Queensland time. The tracking map shows Narelle becoming a Category 2 by 10 p.m. Queensland time tomorrow and a Category 3 by 10 p.m. on Thursday. The tracking map shows that Tropical Cyclone Narelle will cross the Australian mainland as a Category 3 storm at about 10 a.m. on Friday morning. And this would be in the Princess Charlotte Bay area. The nearest community is Cohen, which is about 50 kilometres inland from Princess Charlotte Bay. Now, as it approaches the far north coast, the Weather Bureau warns to expect strong winds and heavy rain, especially to the south of the predicted cyclone tracking map. So all areas between north of Cairns and about Lockhart River are on cyclone watch at the moment. The Cook Shire Council is now looking at its disaster planning, and Robin Holmes, the mayor, says her flock is prepared. The council has already made plans, but the land is saturated. Most of the region is on flood watch, so it is expected that not much rain is needed for further flooding to occur. So strong winds are expected, gales are expected for the coming days in far north Queensland.
And the Bureau of Meteorology is due to update that forecast track map for that expected cyclone within the hour, so we'll bring you that news as soon as it comes through. Parts of the Northern Territory have transitioned from emergency response to recovery after major flooding wreaked havoc in Katherine, Beswick and Gilkmingan communities. The Bureau of Meteorology has downgraded a severe storm warning for the Simpson district, but a major flood warning remains in place for the Daly River. Despite a reprieve for the Katherine region, much of the state remains, or the Territory, remains on flood watch with more rain on the way. The Territory's Chief Minister has announced a $100 million flood recovery fund focused on rebuilding infrastructure impacted by the widespread flooding. A Sydney court has heard the mother and siblings of alleged Bondi Beach gunman Naveed Akram are living in constant fear for their safety, enduring death threats, stalking and intimidation. The 24-year-old's lawyers have asked a magistrate for their identities to be suppressed on safety grounds. Here's court reporter Jamie McKinnell in Sydney.
24-year-old Naveed Akram faces nearly 60 criminal charges over the attack at Bondi Beach on December 14, which unfolded during a Jewish event. Now, those charges include 15 counts of murder, dozens of charges of attempted murder, and 1 count of committing a terrorist act. The 24-year-old is yet to enter a plea to those charges. But today, in the Downing Centre local court, through his lawyers, he sought a suppression order over the identities of his mother, his brother and his sister. His barrister, Senior Public Defender Richard Wilson SC, said the relatives have nothing to do with the criminal proceedings. And he said the risk of vigilantes seeking vengeance or retribution against Akram's immediate family is something that could be addressed through something like a suppression order. Mr Wilson told the court that that risk of vigilantism has already manifested through a series of incidents which basically began to unfold in the weeks after the Bondi shooting. The court was told the family has endured anonymous death threats over the phone and in messages to Mr Akram's mother and brother. There have been items including pork chops thrown into their driveway at their home, and there have been people going to their house and knocking loudly on their door late at night. The court was told these incidents have been reported to police, but by the time officers show up, there's not a lot that can be done. In an affidavit to the court, Naveed Akram's mother said, "We live in constant fear that in any moment someone may harm us or set our house on fire." She said, "I fear for my life and the lives of my children." Now, a barrister representing media outlets, including the ABC, Matt Lewis SC, opposed the making of this suppression order. He said this information is already in the public domain, and the court might understandably have a level of sympathy for Naveed Akram's immediate family. He said he wasn't submitting otherwise, but he also told the magistrate, unfortunately, they are but 3 further people who have been greatly impacted by the attack at Bondi Beach. Magistrate Hugh Donnelly will now take some time to consider all of these submissions and come back on April the 2nd to give a final decision.
Jamie McKinnell reporting there. Laws to strengthen penalties for LGBT plus hate crimes have entered the New South Wales Parliament. It comes after the ABC exposed a spate of homophobic attacks where victims were lured on apps and bashed on camera. Alexander Lewis reports.
Well, as the ABC revealed earlier this month, police have recorded nearly 200 incidents of anti-LGBTQIA+ violence in New South Wales since 2023. In dozens of cases, young offenders lured victims on dating or hookup apps to assaults or violent robberies. The bashings were often filmed by attackers, some of whom were supporters of the Islamic State terrorist group.
Kill him, kill him! You want to be gay? You want to be gay?
The Premier was so moved by this footage, he ordered urgent legislation to crack down on such offending. A key component of the reforms introduced to Parliament today is a new offence of luring victims on false pretences and to offend against them, including via dating apps. This won't just apply to attacks on LGBTQIA+ people, but to the entire community. So-called post and boast offences will be expanded to cover serious assaults and robberies, meaning those who film and upload videos of bashings will be guilty of an additional offence. Importantly, sentencing laws will be changed to make it easier for prosecutors to prove hatred as an aggravating factor, that is, a factor weighing in favour of a harsher punishment. The factor will be easier to prove because hatred will be deemed to apply when an offender expresses prejudice at the time of the offence.
We will not allow that in New South Wales in 2026, and where we see incidents of it, we'll make sure we throw the book at them. This is deplorable and disgusting behaviour, and it needs to be met with a decisive and comprehensive law and order response.
The government will also raise maximum penalties for the existing offence of incitement of violence based on hatred from 3 years to as high as 7 years. But there's scepticism about whether it'll make a difference, given that the current offence has never been used in relation to sexual orientation or gender identity since it entered the statute books in 2018. There are calls for police to be given better training at detecting and prosecuting such offences, including from this community legal service.
One of the things that we do at ICLC is actually print out the legislation and show it to the police. And we haven't been able to use hate crimes legislation, but we so frequently use the Crimes and Domestic Violences Act to print it out. We take it in and say, here you go. This is the offence that you can use to charge this offender that has offended against our client.
Meantime, the Minns government remains under pressure to release a report into whether criminal hate speech should be expanded from racial hatred to that based on sexual orientation and gender identity. The report by former Judge John Sacker has been sitting on the Premier's desk since November.
We need to keep going. We also need to make sure that our hate speech laws also cover incitement of violence and hatred to LGBTQ people.
The Premier has refused to say what the report recommends. He says the Cabinet is still working out how to respond.
Alexander Lewis reporting there. Australia and New Zealand have pledged to press ahead with integrating their militaries more closely after a meeting with Defence and Foreign Affairs Ministers in Canberra. Foreign Affairs reporter Stephen Jedgetts joins us now from Parliament House in Canberra. Stephen, g'day. So take us through what both countries are trying to do here.
Look, Joe, this is something that's been underway for quite some time. Of course, Australia and New Zealand are already allies and have been for decades. But what we're seeing, particularly with this increasingly dangerous and uncertain world, is that process of integration is really picking up. So increasingly you're seeing Australians serving in the NZDF, they're seconded across, and vice versa. Sometimes senior officers from New Zealand coming across to be embedded in the ADF. You've got more complex, more common joint exercises being conducted together. You've got more and more people in the Australian Air Force and the Australian Navy and from the New Zealand counterparts spending time on the ships and on the planes of their counterparts across the ditch. And more broadly, a move towards what some people are really calling not just interoperability, but full-on integration. Now, this doesn't mean we're going to have a joint army with New Zealand. These are two sovereign nations still with two sovereign defence forces. But you are seeing increasingly them working cheek by jowl very, very closely together. And today, both sides have signed a new document which really cements that progress and commits both sides to pressing on with this project for the next decade. Let's take a listen to what Richard Marles, the Defence Minister, had to say, describing what both nations are trying to do here.
This is important, not just because of the world today, but because both of our defence forces are growing. In both Australia and New Zealand, we are seeing an increased defence expenditure. And what our plan is that as we grow together. Because in having a greater joint force, we are able to leverage the opportunity in terms of much greater capability and much greater effect.
So, Stephen, what does this mean for what the two countries are doing together in the Pacific region?
Well, this is pretty important, Joe, because obviously it comes against the backdrop of what they say rather euphemistically is strategic competition in the region, which is basically Australia, New Zealand and others trying to push back against countries that they perceive as outsiders in the region, particularly China, trying to push into the security space. Now, we've seen a number of initiatives both countries have unveiled in order to push back against this, to try and centralise Australia and New Zealand as the key security partner for Pacific nations. And interestingly, this document goes to that, in particular the Pacific Response Group, which is a plan that has been driven by a bunch of defence ministers out of the Pacific to try and build a response group of militaries that can respond to natural disasters or even to civil unrest. Now, this document says that they want this Pacific response group to be able to respond to crises well within this decade. So that's, not a surprising, but it's an interesting commitment. And Winston Peters, the New Zealand Foreign Minister, who's often pretty forward-leaning on this question, talked pretty expansively at the press conference about the Pacific being not the backyard of Australia and New Zealand, but the front yard. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
This is the blue continent. It's our front yard. And the Pacific also, if you get a chance to tell your listeners and readers, more and more exciting things are happening. Beaming through the Pacific now is all sorts of sports out of Australia. New Zealand getting beaten in rugby from out of New Zealand.
We can't have that happen.
Beaten by the Drua out of Fiji. But it's all happening, So look, sometimes celebrate the great stuff we're doing, because it's all being done in the interest of our front yard.
And Stephen, was there any mention of the war in the Middle East?
Yeah, obviously this wasn't the only thing that was discussed, but of course the war in the Middle East and the implications for Australia and New Zealand were pretty high on the agenda. Both countries really worried about the economic impact this is going to have, particularly if you continue to see the Strait of Hormuz largely blocked. The impacts that has on a flow-on impact on the Australian economy as well as the New Zealand economy. Both Australia and New Zealand also looking at repatriations. Interestingly, Richard Marles was asked again, Joe, about the wedge-tail craft that Australia has sent to the Middle East, and he confirmed that it was sending intelligence back to a joint operations centre which includes the US as well as Middle East countries. So yes, this was done at the request of the United Arab Emirates, but it is sending back, as we suspected, information to other countries as well, including the US.
OK, Stephen Jedget's there in Canberra. The Danish royals have continued their whirlwind tour of Australia with a visit to Melbourne, where they've met business leaders. Reporter Costa Haratos is in Melbourne.
The royal couple have spent day 4 of their Australian tour behind me at Government House here in Melbourne, where they've met with both local and Danish businesses, specifically those working in the green energy space, sustainability and technology as well. Now, King Frederick addressed the delegates here and he spoke about the shared common values that both Victoria and Denmark has. He says both areas have a similar population and also spoke about the strength of democracy as well. Here's a little of what the King had to say a little earlier.
Mary and I hope that many new, possibly historical, outcomes will materialise between Denmark and Australia as an outcome of our visit here in Melbourne.
Earlier in the day, the royal couple met with Victoria's Governor, Margaret Gardner, and also Premier Jacinta Allen. The Danish flags are flying out the front of Government House. They've got a number of engagements later today into the evening as well, before they spend another day in Melbourne tomorrow and then flying down to Tasmania, where, of course, Queen Mary is from, and wrapping up their whirlwind Australian tour.
A quick look at tomorrow's weather now in the capital cities around the nation. Brisbane and Sydney showers, Canberra a shower or two, Melbourne and Hobart partly cloudy, Adelaide cloudy, Perth sunny, top of 36, and showers and a possible storm for Darwin. This is ABC News. Top stories. The Reserve Bank has raised its official cash rate for a second straight month, undoing 2 of last year's 3 cuts. The RBA has lifted rates by 0.25 of a percentage point to 4.1%, the highest it's been in 10 months. Markets had wagered on a rise as inflation holds stubbornly above the central bank's 2 to 3% target range. US President Donald Trump has accused his allies of ingratitude for rejecting his call to help secure shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. A number of US partners, including Germany and Spain, have no immediate plans to send ships to help reopen the waterway, but Mr. Trump says many other countries are enthusiastic about the request. Afghanistan has accused Pakistan of killing at least 400 people in an airstrike on a drug rehabilitation hospital in Kabul. Pakistan has rejected the claim, calling it false and misleading, and says it has only targeted military installations and terrorist support infrastructure. It marks a sharp escalation in the conflict between the neighbours, which began last month. And the Matildas will take on defending champions China in the first semi-finals of the Women's Asian Cup at Perth Stadium tonight. Many of the previous World Cup squad remain in the current lineup, including captain Sam Kerr and goalkeeper Mackenzie Arnold. The winner will play either South Korea or Japan in Sydney in Saturday's final. More now on the Reserve Bank's rate rise and how it may affect you at home. Peter Davidson is Principal Advisor at the Australian Council of Social Service and he joins us now from Sydney. Peter Davidson, welcome. So give us an insight into the pressures that people were under even before this announcement today.
G'day, Joe. The people we're most concerned about are those on the lowest incomes. Incomes like the $400 to $500 a week job seeker payment. Now, given that renting a 2-bedroom apartment in most capital cities is going to cost around $400 to $500 a week, we're talking about people who are spending all of their budgets, all of their income on essentials. So if prices go up, they're not giving up holidays or eating out. They're going without meals and they're at risk of losing their homes altogether if they're paying that much in rent.
Yeah, so what kind of impact is this going to have on people both paying off mortgages and paying rent in dollar terms?
Well, it's going to hit typical mortgages by probably $20 to $30 a week. It won't directly impact rents, but it means probably that less rental housing will be built, and rents are already rising by 4 to 8% a year. Rents are rising very rapidly again. And so the impact on the people we're most concerned about will be severe.
And what about the possibility of another rate increase, which is being speculated about in May?
Well, we're worried about this. Up until now, the Reserve Bank has stuck to what it calls its narrow path, maintaining the gains on employment while squeezing inflation out of the economy. If they stray from that, if they become too aggressive in hiking interest rates, then those gains in employment that we've had since the pandemic will be lost. We'll be back to unemployment around 5 to 6%. And that would mean, since the RBA started hiking rates a few years ago, around 300,000 more people unemployed. So prices will go up as a result of the war if it's sustained. Oil prices will go up, gas and home energy prices will go up, and groceries will probably go up as well. But those impacts will be temporary. Once the war ends, and hopefully it happens soon, those price increases will fade. But if those interest rate hikes increase unemployment, that would be a severe and enduring impact on the people we're concerned about. 900,000 people living on job seeker payments, $400 to $500 a week.
Yeah, there's been a lot of discussion over the past 6 months in particular about the challenges of inflation. How does it make you feel when you hear during these discussions a lot of experts say it's just, unfortunately, it's going to be the case that unemployment has to rise if we're going to get on top of inflation?
Well, it's a bit like the old politicians sending young people to war, isn't it? The people who call for an economic downturn, or let's call it a recession, probably won't be directly impacted themselves. The people who will be impacted will be the 900,000 people living on job seeker payment who'll find it a lot harder to find employment, the young people and women entering and re-entering the labour market who'll find it harder to find the job they need, and the people who are stuck in casual 2-day-a-week jobs that don't bring them enough income to live on. Those are the people who'll be affected. And we seem to have a policy in Australia where we engineer a certain level of unemployment to keep inflation under control. But instead of supporting those who are affected through no fault of their own, we keep them on poverty level payments and punish them.
The government says it is offering cost of living relief. To what extent is that helping?
Well, things like the higher Medicare rebates and cheaper medications certainly help people on low to modest incomes. The increases in childcare subsidies probably help as well, because those are unavoidable costs for people on low and modest incomes. It's probably not a good idea for the government to reintroduce across-the-board energy subsidies, which will cost a lot of money to the budget, and the budget is struggling at the moment, and may well increase inflation eventually. So any help with cost of living should be targeted to people on the lowest incomes, especially people on income support. There are a couple of other things that the government could do to reduce the impact of the war, if it's prolonged, on inflation. One is to reintroduce the temporary cap on gas prices, which they introduced a couple of years ago. That would prevent the impact of the war flowing through to household energy prices, including electricity, and we don't want to see a return of the very large increases in household energy prices that we had after the Ukraine war. We don't want to go through that again, and curbing gas prices and discouraging gas miners from exporting our gas via a 25% levy on gas exports, as we and the ACTU have called for. That would also help keep more of our gas at home and improve supply and reduce prices. And state governments could act to curb rent increases, which have been skyrocketing again, unfortunately.
OK, Peter Davidson from ACOS, thanks so much for having a chat to us from Sydney.
Thank you, Joe.
US President Donald Trump has sought to delay a highly anticipated meeting with China's leader in Beijing later this month. Here's China correspondent Alison Horn in Beijing.
US President Donald Trump was meant to arrive here to Beijing in less than a fortnight's time for this highly anticipated meeting with China's President Xi Jinping. Now, Washington has revealed it wants to delay the trip. Donald Trump saying he's requested a delay of a month or so because of the Iran war. Now, China hasn't publicly responded to this request yet, and already so much preparation has gone into this meeting. For a country and governance that likes to have everything meticulously planned out, I think this will irk Beijing. Also because Donald Trump has recently tried to exert power over China by threatening this very trip would be delayed if China didn't help to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Now, China is Iran's most powerful political and economic backer, but has so far stayed out of this war. And some commentators are questioning whether this request to delay is actually a Trump power play, even though the White House says the president's focus right now needs to be on the Iran war.
We're speaking to China. I'd love to, but because of the war, I want to be here. I have to be here, I feel. And so we've requested that we delay it a month or so, and I'm looking forward to being with them. We have a very good relationship, but because of the war, there's no tricks to it either. It's not like, oh, gee, I'm waiting. It's very simple. We got a war going on. I think it's important that I be here. You know? So it could be that we delay it a little bit. Not much.
Now, I expect we'll hear some commentary from China's foreign ministry on this issue later today, but it does run the risk of magnifying tensions between Beijing and Washington at a time when that relationship was just starting to look a little more stable.
And the war in the Middle East was launched just as millions of people in the region began fasting for Lent and Ramadan. It's left hundreds of thousands of residents displaced ahead of Eid and Easter celebrations.
For millions of people across the world, this time of year is synonymous with prayer and reflection. But for many in the Middle East, it's been marred by war. Roughly 2 billion Muslims are observing Ramadan, while 2.5 billion Christians are marking Lent. Both are lengthy periods that include fasting and community connection.
I know that Muslim Lebanese are living Ramadan, Christian Lebanese are living Lent, and these should be moments of peace, these should be moments of solidarity.
In Lebanon, more than 800,000 residents have been displaced, many not knowing when their next meal will be.
We have approximately 4 buildings, hosting around 2,500 displaced people, and the number of displaced people is increasing every day.
Volunteers at a school in Beirut have been preparing meals for those taking shelter from ongoing Israeli strikes. In Jerusalem, Muslim worshippers have prayed in the streets after Israeli authorities closed the Al-Aqsa Mosque over security concerns. The compound is a holy site for the world's 3 Abrahamic religions.
Why are people being kept away from this prayer? That is freedom of worship. People should be allowed to pray.
And for Palestinians in Gaza, it'll be the 3rd year the holy month has fallen during wartime. With much of the territory in ruins, people are making do with what they have. This community is holding prayers inside a tarp tent.
The Iran war will have a significant impact because we will be forgotten by the countries that want to help us.
For now, thousands are sharing evening gatherings, soundtracked by bombs and air raid sirens. Samantha Aisha, ABC News.
Cuba's national energy grid has suffered a total collapse causing an island-wide blackout and leaving 11 million people without electricity. It's the third blackout in the country in the past 4 months. Cuba is enduring one of its most severe economic and energy crises in decades. It's been cut off from critical oil shipments since January, when the US President Donald Trump threatened to impose tariffs on any country selling or providing oil to Cuba. President Trump says the US could soon reach a deal with Havana, going as far as to say a takeover is not out of the question. Twin sisters in New South Wales have discovered they were born to a mother they're not genetically related to. One of the sisters accidentally uncovered the IVF mix-up last year after sending a DNA sample to a genealogy website. It's the second known case of an embryo mix-up of this kind in Australia. For more, ABC journalist Elise Kinsella has the details from Melbourne.
One of the twin sisters, Sasha Safransky, she joined a genealogy tracing website last year, and it was a reason that had nothing to do with IVF. She was just curious about her dad's Polish heritage and wanting to learn more. So she sent away her DNA, and when the results came back, they were quite quickly confusing. So they said that she had no Polish heritage, and then they matched her with a complete stranger who also lived in the same coastal community. And the website said that this woman was her maternal aunt. So the pair started chatting, and they quickly discovered this IVF crossover. So this woman's sister and her husband in the 90s had undergone IVF just at the same time as Sasha's parents had. And they discovered that they both used the same clinic. Both families at this point went and had further DNA tests at accredited labs, and those results came back showing a 99.9% chance that Sasha and her twin sister are the biological children of this other couple they'd never met. Both of the families have hired lawyers to investigate, so they know that both couples were undergoing IVF treatment at Royal North Shore Hospital in Sydney at the same time. But what they don't know is actually how the mistake happened. So the hospital has said at the time of the embryo transfer that it had privatised the clinic already. Now that company no longer exists. It was taken over years later by another company, which was later acquired by Virtus Health, which also denies responsibility. And so for Penny Safransky, who is Sasha's mum, there's a sense of not having any answers about a problem that she never had any inkling about.
It never even entered my head that you wouldn't be, getting the embryos that were mine.
For Sasha, it's really important that this very, very large IVF mistake was put on the public record, that it's not swept under the carpet, and the public does know that this happened in Australia in our IVF sector. She said to me it's really important that she gets answers for her mum and her biological parents, and she wants our politicians and regulators who oversee the industry to hear her family story and see the consequences of a mistake that is this large. But interestingly, she really does still support IVF.
I think IVF is just incredible. I wouldn't be here without it. People wouldn't have their families without it, but it's just, you just have to get it right.
So that's Sasha Safransky, who was talking about the IVF sector in Australia after last year learning that she and her twin sister were born to parents they are not biologically related to.
Elise Kinsella there, and you can see more of the ABC's exclusive story with Sasha and Penny on tonight's 7:30 program on ABC TV, and you can see it any time later on ABC iView. Electric bikes and scooters are commonplace in most Australian cities now. Supporters say they're a cheap and sustainable means of travel, but there are also increasing concerns that unregistered, modified versions are being used illegally.
Jeff put a 5,000-watt motor on his push bike. It's 20 times more powerful than what's allowed on the road.
I ride it quite often because petrol's going up, and plus it's cheap to run.
He's one of many making illegal modifications to their bikes.
On the footpath I go slow because, you've got other people sort of thing.
A global boom in e-devices like bikes and scooters, driving up concern about safety for riders and the community. While SA Health doesn't collect specific data, it says clinicians have seen first-hand significant injuries resulting from electric scooter and e-bike incidents. And police have been cracking down on illegal devices and reckless driving.
I'm happy for you to police it to get rid of the yahoos.
With these issues, along with nationwide debates about registration, age limits and what can actually be sold, some riders reckon the benefits of green transport can often be forgotten.
So people typically buying those for commuting, especially when
Bike shop owners insist e-bikes are quite different to the souped-up variety.
Unless it's got a registration number plate. If it's doing 70 kilometres an hour, it's definitely not legal. Power doesn't come in until I start pedalling. No throttle, top speed of 25 kilometres an hour.
Emma Dawes and her family sold their car in favour of an e-bike. She believes everyone's safety will improve with more cycling infrastructure.
We really need to be looking for broad and all kinds of solutions to be moving away from car and petrol-based transport.
Hoping the uptake rolls on. Aidan McNamara, ABC News.
Just very quickly before we go on to the next story, the Bureau of Meteorology has released the latest information update on that low that was sitting off the coast of far north Queensland. It has now developed into a cyclone, and they're saying it's going to be Category 4, which will likely to cause some pretty serious damage and likely to hit the coast near Cohen on Friday. I'll bring you more details on that within the next 10 minutes or so. Actually, yeah, we don't have that story at the moment, so maybe this is an opportunity to go into what's happening with the cyclone, and maybe we can bring up the map of the cyclone. We're having a few technical challenges here at the moment, so we can't bring up the map, but I'll just mention, so Tropical Cyclone Narelle has developed in the Coral Sea and is expected to bring severe impacts to far north Queensland. They've got it hitting the coast on Friday at about midday as a Category 4 in that Princess Charlotte Bay area. So it's drifted a little bit south, and no doubt over the next 4 days it's going to drift up and down. You don't know where it's actually going to end up. But yeah, there'll be some concern with that now, considering it's going to be a Category 4. I might just mention with cyclones at Category 4, that's wind speeds up to strongest gusts up to 280 kilometres an hour, significant roofing loss and structural damage, many caravans destroyed and blown away, extensive damage to vegetation, dangerous airborne debris, widespread power failures. So, we'll bring you more details on that and the map when we can. Now let's go to sport with Jared Coote. Jared, hi. So a huge game for the Matildas tonight against China. They're kind of evenly placed on the world rankings. I think Australia's 15 and China's 17 or something like that.
Perfect. You nailed it, Joe. You don't need me. What do you need me here for?
Get out of here.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, they're pretty close, and who knows who's going to win. Yeah, of course, but it's over in Perth. What a match this is going to be. Yeah. Tough to pick a winner in this one. I guess you're just looking at the Australians as the host nation as well. But, the Matildas, for good news for them, Steph Catley and Haley Razzo are available for selection, both, of course, returning from concussion. That's 249 games worth of experience between them. Coach Joe Montemurro didn't want to say if they were going to actually play there, so we'll have to wait and see what happens there. China, the defending champions, have won 9 times. They struggled to beat Chinese Taipei. They had to go to extra time to win 2-0 in the quarter-final stage. This, of course, a semi-final. Matilda's undefeated in the group stage, just the one draw. A good win over North Korea in the semi-final, who are the top-ranked Asian side. And the Matildas have had an extra day's rest, I think, as well. Absolutely. Yeah. Again, you know, take over. Can I do the news? They were also China's coached by Ante Milicic, which is an interesting side note. Former Socceroo, former coach of the Matildas, so he'll know them very, very well. He coached them not too long ago at all. The last time these two sides played, it was a 2-game series. It was in Australia 2 years ago. Australia won 1 and drew 1. So take from that what you will. Ante Milicic had just started coaching the side at that time. So, yeah, there's a lot to like about this game being an incredibly close encounter. Who's going to win? Toss a coin. It's hard to know, Joe. But, the Matildas, if they play their best, they can certainly win through to the final.
Yeah, it should be a really good game to watch. What's the latest in the AFL? A few rounds into the season now?
Yeah, a few rounds into the season, and big news tonight. Collingwood, they're going to contest Scott Pendlebury's one-match suspension at the AFL Tribunal. The reason this is pretty interesting, Joe, is he's never faced a ban in his entire career, and it spans 427 matches.
Wow.
The veteran was charged with rough conduct following that incident against Adelaide.
What's your read on it, Jared?
As a lawyer, Joe, I mean, I probably wouldn't have as much attention if he didn't have this backstory of never being suspended in his life. Yeah, he's 38 years old, 21 seasons, perfect record. So it's all on the line tonight. It's hard to tell what's going to happen. You just never know with these tribunals, both in the AFL and NRL, what really is going to happen. He might miss the Pies next match. That'll be the GWS at Docklands. That'll be after round 2 because they've got the bye. So, yeah, they're fighting it. We'll see what happens.
And what do you got for us in rugby league?
So it's multicultural round in the NRL this weekend. So many nationalities represented in the NRL. 66, in fact, across
Holy dooly.
The NRL and NRLW. Wow. So pretty exciting. They launched it today. 27% of the current NRL players were born overseas. Over half of the current players' father was born overseas, just under half for the mother. Pretty interesting stuff. 12% NRL players identify as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, 10% are of Maori descent. You see the Panther Casey McLean there. He's represented New Zealand in the past. He can now play Origin, of course, as well. And he says that the players getting to know their cultures better have helped them actually build successful cultures, both within the sport and within his club.
Yeah, 100%. You see the different boys and how they go about their business, but also how you see how they go about their culture. You know, some boys really dive into, you know, and want to see how much their culture means to them. It's a real big part of, you know, who individuals are, and I think that's what helps our team grow and become as successful as it's been.
So that multicultural round, Joe, gets underway on Thursday, but all eyes, of course, on the Matildas tonight. Asian Cup semi-final, taking on China. Let's see how they all play.
Thanks, Jared.
Thank you.
Now let's go to the weather. Taking a look at the satellite image, and upper-level disturbance is associated with a band of mid to high-level clouds streaming over southeastern Australia. Spotty low-level cloud lies over much of the Australian tropics. On the synoptic chart, thunderstorms in the tropics are drawing increasingly heavy rain into South Australia. Cold fronts crossing Tassie are producing showers mainly in the west. Looking at the country for tomorrow, starting in Queensland, scattered showers and thunderstorms about the far west and southern interior, isolated rain about the eastern districts. To New South Wales and the ACT, widespread rain and isolated storms in the far west with possible falls in the far northwest corner. In Victoria, isolated showers mainly about the northeast and alpine regions, possible rain developing along the New South Wales border, dry elsewhere. In Tassie, mostly fine after morning valley fog. Afternoon sea breezes about the northern and eastern coasts. South Australia, showers about the northern agricultural area and pastoral districts, possibly extending into the north. For WA, possible morning fog over the far south coastal district. In WA's north, rain and thunderstorms, and for the Northern Territory, showers in the north, possible rain over the interior and clearing rain in the south. Looking ahead to Thursday's forecast for the capital cities, Brisbane and Sydney a shower or two, Canberra possible storms, cloudy in Melbourne, overcast in Hobart and Adelaide, Perth sunny, and possible afternoon storms in Darwin. Yes, so just repeating that breaking news that's just come through in the last 10 minutes or so from the Bureau of Meteorology. This cyclone off the far north Queensland coast, a fair way off the coast at the moment, Cyclone Narelle has formed. So this is the first forecast track map that we've got with the cyclone actually being formed. And it's expected to get into a Category 3 actually by tomorrow afternoon. And yeah, the concerning news is that it's expected to be a Category 4, so a really powerful storm when it hits the coast on Friday somewhere near Cohen. But yeah, as we always say with these cyclones, you don't exactly know where they're going to hit until much closer to the time. But people in far north Queensland are preparing for a potentially powerful cyclone later this week. Stick with us here on the ABC News Channel.